Okay, then let me start. First, thank you for having me this wonderful workshop, and also attending in this early morning. Actually, this is all late night in Korea, but anyway, it is very happy to have this kind of talk. So today's talk is about household financial health, a machine learning approach. So I will talk about around like three studies that I've been doing recently. So this is the famous opening line of Anna Karenina that all happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And this shows a lot of things, but I think for us, it is showing that households are actually heterogeneous. So the heterogeneity in household finance means that the exact same amount of debt could be very much burdened to some households, but it may not be for some other households. And it may remain the same even if we consider households with similar income level. For some households even with the same income level, if they are still repaying for their house mortgage, then it may be difficult to get additional loan. But for even with the same income level, for households who already own their houses, then getting additional loan may not be a big problem. So from this, we can see that there are many variables should be considered at the same time in order to measure the the health of household finance. So if we are going to develop machine learning models for household finance data or retail investor data, we should account for this kind of heterogeneity. So in today's talk, let me first briefly present clustering analysis studies of household balance sheet data and retail investor transactions data. Actually, I have seen that Adam Metzler is attending now, and I think he will be presenting about similar topic tomorrow. So I'm very looking forward to it. So let me first present my work. This one is based on two papers. One is published in Annals of Operational Research, and one is still ongoing. So previous studies on household heterogeneity is they mostly originated from consumption-based CAPM. So in consumption-based CAPM, they try to build link between consumption and portfolio allocation. So this study originated from the pioneering study of Merton in 1973, and there were many other studies. And they tried to solve the equity premium puzzle that was proposed by Mera and Prescott in 1985. And in these kind of studies, they use representative consumer, meaning that they kind of assume there is one type of consumer in the market. And then they try to solve the math in the consumption-based CAPM. And they found that this kind of using representative consumer in consumption-based CAPM, they lead to inaccurate estimate of equity premium. So they started to account for heterogeneities in income, stock holding, savings, wealth, those kind of things. So these people try to incorporate this kind of heterogeneity in consumption-based CAPM. But the problem is that they still saying that additional dimension of household heterogeneity should be introduced to better capture the joint distribution of wealth, income, expenditure that we observe in the data. So the actual heterogeneity that we observe in the data, they incorporate so many things. So just considering heterogeneity in terms of like a couple of variables like income or savings, that would not be helpful for dissecting or decomposing this kind of heterogeneity that exists in retail data. So this is an example from Korean household data. So this chart is showing the household portfolio location in terms of different asset types. And this horizontal axis is the total asset percentile. So the left is showing the households with the smallest assets. And on the right side, we are looking at the wealthiest households. So for example, we can see that from the left side, the poorest households, they rely almost 100% on deposit savings. So they do not have any other type of assets, but they start to get other type of assets as they become more wealthier. You can see that this one is showing the long-term rental deposit. Actually, this is kind of specific to Korea. It's because we have a special type of residence that put a lot of money in rental deposit. So this increases a lot in here, but it decreases. And what increases is that this residential housing. So as households get wealthier, the value of residential housing increases, of course, but it starts to decrease after around like 60% wealth, and this purple one start to increase, which is the non-residential real estate. It may include like cars or additional houses and so on. So you can see that the wealthiest people will have values in cars or other houses and so on. So what we can see from this chart is that there is a very strong and complex nonlinear relationship between asset level and portfolio location. And this kind of relationship is still very much complicated, even if we consider only the first asset quintile of households. This one is showing the result of the first asset quintile, but still it does not change much. And if we consider like fifth asset quintile, this also does not change much. We still have very complex relationship between the asset level and portfolio location. So what we can see from here is that dividing households in terms of like income or asset, like in terms of a couple of features or variables, is not much helpful. So this is the conventional approach to measure or estimate the analyze the household finance data. So we have the household finance data and we group them in terms of income or age, asset level, and so on. And then we do the analysis. So in these kind of approaches, households are grouped in terms of a couple of features, and you can see that we have seen that the heterogeneity is not much reduced within such subgroups. So what we want to do is we have the same data, but we will use deep learning based clustering methods, and then we do the analysis. So we use all features to cluster households using deep learning. And we are using this kind of approach because deep learning may be able to capture the nonlinear relationships between many different variables. So the data that we used is Korean Household Finances and Living Conditions Survey. This was conducted by National Statistical Office of Korea, Bank of Korea, and so on. And this investigates the living standards of economic situations of Korean households. So they have variables like in the amounts in like financial assets, real estates, and so on. And also they have data on how much debt they have in terms of for house mortgage or just for living expenses or business and so on. Also, they have data on the income level, expenditures, retirement plans, and so on. And we use the survey data from 2017 to 2020. It incorporates around 40,000 households. And we also do the similar research on retail investor data. We got the transactions data in Korean stock market. This was provided by one of the top securities firms in South Korea.
Yongjae,
yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Your survey data, is that self-reported asset values or?
Yeah.
And
It
that's all self-reported?
Yeah, mostly self-reported, but maybe checked by the statistical office.
Okay, thanks.
So it may incorporate some errors. Okay, the second data that we use is retail investor transactions data. This incorporates around 330,000 investors. It goes from 2016 January to 2020 December. So the method that we used in these two studies is something called the N2D, not too deep framework for deep clustering that was proposed by McConville et al. So in this framework, it first uses autoencoder, which is a deep learning method for dimension reduction. It first uses autoencoder to reduce the dimension of data a little bit, not too much. And then it applies the manifold learning techniques like UMAP or TSNE, those kind of techniques to further reduce the dimension of the data to like 2-dimension or 3-dimension. After reducing the dimension of data, we just apply conventional clustering algorithm. The McConville et al. They showed that this kind of approach is quite effective compared to other deep clustering method that uses more complex and complicated techniques. We use this one because we also found that other deep clustering methods are quite sensitive to hyperparameters and so on. So they are quite hard to use especially for the analysis purpose. So we thought that this simple method would be better for our analysis. So we followed this kind of framework. Since we don't have much time, I will just briefly show the result. So on the left-hand side, this one is the overall portfolio location that I showed just before. And these other 5 gray charts are based on the income quintile. As you can see, the lines in these charts, they are quite looks quite complicated. On the right-hand side, this one is showing the portfolio locations within each cluster that were found by deep clustering method. And I believe that on the right-hand side, the lines in the charts, they are much simpler. They look much simpler compared to the lines that we see here. So I think the clustering is quite helpful in reducing heterogeneity within the groups or clusters. So it means that you can find better groups or clusters for analysis. So based on our deep clustering analysis result, we try to find a deterministic decision tree for household clusters. For example, if we have households, we can first divide them in terms of the proportion in real estate. If they have like more than 60%, they go to the more wealthier group. And if they have a real estate less than 60%, then they go to a poorer group. Within the wealthy group, we can divide them further based on non-residential real estate. If the proportion is greater than 35%, then they go to the most rich group. If not, they go into like second richest group. And within the poor group, we can divide them based on the credit loan. So within the poor group, the poorest households may not be able to get mortgage loans because they do not have any things that can they cannot afford the mortgage. So in that case, the poorest group would have a lot of credit loans. So I think this is why, because it appears here. So just like this, we have found that our deep clustering results can be interpreted in terms of this kind of a simple decision tree. But of course, this is not like automatically generated from our method. We just try to find this kind of relationship based on the results that we have got from the deep clustering analysis. And of course, there are many other analysis results in the paper. So you may find it in the paper if you are interested. And as I said, we applied the same technique to retail investors' data. Here we also found 8 clusters. And while there are some consistent relationship between the balance, the amount of money in the balance, and like the number of buy orders, or number of sell orders, or number of turnover, while there are like this consistent relationship between balance and buy order, sell order, turnover, and so on, but there are 2 groups that were out of this trend, group A and H. And for the relationship between balance and deposit or withdrawal, there is also kind of a consistent relationship between balance and the deposit and withdrawal. But also there were 2 groups that were out of these trends, here E and F. So there are group A and H that lie outside from this relationship, and there are group E and H that lie outside of this relationship. So here, this one is showing the realized profit distribution of the overall data, and for cluster A and cluster H. So this gray one is the distribution of realized profit of the entire retail investor that we had. And the black one is showing the distribution of cluster A, and here cluster H, and so on. And here we can see that group A and H show slightly different patterns in realized profit from 5% to 30%. For group A, they are showing a smaller profit in here, and here for group H, they are showing a larger profit. They have more probability of achieving profit around here. And for cluster E and F, they were also outside the trend of some relationship. You can see that, especially for group E, they have very large probability of achieving 3 to 5% of profit. So it seems like they have, and also they have a very large probability in -3 to -5. So they have quite a strict rule for selling or buying within some rule. So I think for investors in cluster E, they have some kind of their own rules. And if you look at cluster F, you can see that they have very large probability of achieving more than 30% of profits. So you can see that they are very good at investing. So what we can found from this kind of analysis is that even though we did not use any returns data on each cluster, we just used the data based on how much orders they put, how much deposit or withdrawals they made and so on. And based on those kind of behavior data, we found that we could identify some interesting clusters that have very specific profit distributions. Okay, I think I don't have much time left. Let me briefly cover the second one. It is about diagnosing household financial health. So we have seen that households are very heterogeneous. So how should we approach this problem? The idea is that we can get an idea from physical health. Physical health is also a relative concept, just like financial health. For example, like the same body weight can be interpreted very differently depending on the subject's age, height, or muscle mass. So if you think of health checkup, the keys to health checkup would be like a lot of clinical data, analysis based on patients' characteristics like underlying disease, age, gender, and we can be able to give customized advices. So similarly, if we think of financial health checkup, the keys to financial health checkup would be a lot of financial status data and analysis based on households' characteristics like asset, liability, income, expenditure. And also based on this, we may be able to give customized advices. And another big problem in financial health checkup is that how can you measure a household financial health? There is no answer or label to this question, except for some extreme cases like the household went default. So we are dealing with an unsupervised learning problem here. So we use the same data that we used for household clustering analysis. The main idea in this study is to incorporate some kind of risk score. If we think of autoencoder, they give representations that can be reconstructed in the original inputs. It means that we do not have any order in the latent space of autoencoders. So we try to incorporate risk score to each input based on some simple rules. For example, we may have a larger the better relationship for asset variables, smaller the better for debt variables, and nominal the best, meaning that it is best to have within some range for expenditure or consumption variables. So we make the autoencoder to be trained to approximate the risk score, as well as, of course, to minimize the reconstruction score. So we have these kind of steps. We have like 3 different autoencoders for asset variables, debt variables, expenditures, and each of them is to minimize the reconstruction error and also to approximate the risk information. And then the latent variables for asset, debt, expenditure, they are concatenated to have the final representation. So we have another autoencoder. So we have a hierarchical autoencoder. So in detail, it looks like this. To briefly give the results, we tested the model based on 4 indicators that are mainly used for financial health checkup in practice. The first one is the cash outflow over cash inflow. Second indicator is debt over asset. Third indicator is expenditure over liquid asset. And the fourth indicator is retirement preparedness. We try to capture it by comparing the distributions of the healthy groups that were obtained from our model and unhealthy group that were obtained from also obtained from our lab model. And we compare the 2 groups based on these 4 indicators. If the healthier group has the better in terms of these indicators, then we have these circles. And if not, we have like these crosses. So you can see we have a lot of circles, means that our model can capture healthy households based on like these four conventional indicators. So it means that our model is also interpretable based on the conventional approaches. And this one is showing how each variable in each group can impact the financial health. But since we don't have much time, if you're interested, I think this paper will be published within few weeks or within a couple of months. So I think you will be able to see this paper very soon. So let me give the concluding remarks. So based on our study, I think we can see that deep learning can be very much helpful in understanding heterogeneous households and retail investors. And although we did not include I did not say anything about this in this talk, but since we have done some unsupervised studies, now I'm quite interested in extending these works into supervised studies as well. So we are trying to investigate the default in mortgage loans and change in consumption patterns and recommendation of financial assets. So I think this will be very interesting studies going on. And one interesting technical hurdle in this kind of studies we found was to efficiently handle tabular data, meaning that unlike images or text, deep learning has not been much successful in handling tabular data. And for this kind of tabular data, still the methods like XGBoost, they are still the best model. So we are trying to develop semi-supervised learning techniques for tabular data with continuous and categorical variables. Okay, thank you for listening.